Hello and welcome to my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I made this picture. Capturing the moment of pouring wine into a glass has many random factors. It can be made considerably simpler by removing as much randomness as possible. You can then concentrate on the essence of the picture itself. And in this video I'll show you exactly how I did it. Okay, so this is what we're going to be photographing. Pouring wine from a bottle into a glass. So if I just normally did this, I would have the randomness of the position of the glass and the randomness of the position of the bottle. And then also more randomness of the wine coming out of the bottle and hopefully getting into the glass. All at the same time as lighting it correctly, making sure there's no highlights on the glass that you don't want, etc., etc. So that would all be a bit of a nightmare. So there's all sorts of ways that you can make it a bit simpler to do. So I'm going to actually start with the bottle. Now if you have a full bottle of wine, pouring the wine out of that bottle is a little unpredictable. So one of the things that I'm going to do to help in the reduction of randomness would be to actually modify the bottle. And what I'm going to do is score around the bottom of the bottle here so that I can remove the bottom part. This has a score line all the way around it, and I've done that with a glass cutter. Then if you stress the bottle by pouring hot water and then cold water alternatively across that score line, it will eventually propagate a crack which will go all the way through the bottle, allowing you to remove the bottom of the bottle. So then, if I place these in this sort of position, I can use this as a funnel to pour wine into the glass with. Which brings me on to the next part of getting rid of the randomness, and that would be to place all these things in some clamps so that the whole thing is tied down. So for the bottle, I have a retort stand here, and what I'm going to do is just place the bottle in the stand like so. There we are. And now I can do a similar thing with the glass. So I have another retort stand here, and I'll place the glass in the stand at the bottom here. There we are. Okay, so now we have these elements of the picture fixed in space. So I can now concentrate on where to put the camera, background and lighting, etc. So the first thing I want to do is set my camera on this tripod, and you will need a tripod for this because there will be an element of compositing later on in the image. So it's important to keep the camera in exactly the same place. Again, it gets rid of that randomness. So I'm using a medium format camera, but this can be done with virtually anything. And this medium format camera has a 120mm macro lens on the front of it. So in full frame format terms, something like a 70mm will give you the same field of view. The camera is also tethered into Capture One software, so it's easy to follow along and see the results as I get them. So I'm just going to place this on the tripod that I've set up at the front here, like so. Okay, so with that I'll put the viewfinder up and turn the camera on. There we are. So you should be able to see that the software has recognized the camera, and these are all the settings that I have on the camera at the moment. So it's in full manual mode. I have a shutter speed of 1/60th of a second, ISO 100, and the aperture at the moment is set to f4. Now that's the maximum aperture for this lens, so in effect it's wide open. That will give me a very narrow depth of field. So what I want to do first of all is, just with the house lights, just take a test image just to make sure I've got everything more or less in the right place. So what I'm going to do is change this shutter speed from a 60th to something that I can use to capture the image just in here. So I would think something like 15th might work. Let's give that a try. And what I'm going to do for focusing is just touch the autofocus button here. There we are. So the camera has now focused itself. So at those settings, what I'll do is just grab an image and we'll see what we get. And there you can see that we've got the glass and the bottle in the center of the frame, more or less in the right orientation. Okay, so far so good. So the next thing to do will be to set up a background. Now the background will also be the main light source for this picture. So what I'm going to do is just place a flash head at the back here, and then in front of that I'm going to place some diffusion material, and that diffusion material which will form the background. So this is the flash head that I'll be using. I'm just going to place this at the back here, something like that. It wants to be at a reasonable height so that you end up with this being in line with the center of the image and the camera. Alright, so with that in place, I'll just put some diffusion material in place as well. So I've got a C-stand here, so I'm just going to place the C-stand about there somewhere, put that up in the air a bit, and here I have some diffusion material, so I'll just pull that down. There we are. You can see it's actually almost touching the diffusion material. So that will give a hotspot in this area. Now you can control the size of that hotspot by maneuvering the whole of this assembly forwards and backwards. And you can also control the amount of diffusion either side of the hotspot by changing the apparent distance between the flash head and the diffusion material. So to start with, I'm just putting it as close as possible, and I've got this relatively close as well. So the next thing to do would be to reset the camera so that it has flash settings on it. So what I'm going to do is just change the shutter speed here from a 15th, and I'll change that up to the flash sync speed for this camera, which is 1/125th of a second. Now also, I don't want to be using a ridiculously narrow depth of field, which I'll get with f4. So I'm going to change the aperture to something more reasonable. So I think f11 should do me. And just at those settings, but before I've actually turned the flash on, I'll grab an image and just make sure I've now cut out all of that natural light. There we are. So apart from a few highlights in the bottle and on the glass, that's more or less black, which is what I want. So now all the light which is going to actually illuminate the scene will come from this flash head. So we'll turn it on and just at an arbitrary energy level, grab an image and see what we get. And so immediately you can see that at that energy level, that is way overexposed. So I need to take, 2 or 3 stops off that at least, maybe 4. So what I can do is just bring up the flash sync trigger, that's selected, so I'll just take 3 stops off for now. And I'll just grab that again. Okay, so yes, that's getting there. You can see what I mean about the size of the hotspot that I've got here, and also that this is way over still. So I think I need at least another stop off to make this realistic. So I can just do that and we'll grab it again. Yes, that's more like it. So now I've got this hotspot in the middle and I've got a graduation going off to the sides. But I think overall that hotspot is a bit too big for the picture that I'm trying to take. So I want to reduce its size. So the easy way to do that, like I said before, is just to move this whole assembly backwards. So I've moved it, about 1 meter away, and it is still just touching the diffusion material at the back. So with that change, I'll grab another image and see what we get. And you should be able to see in that we've got a much smaller hotspot than we had before. So this was the original position, and this is what we've got now. If anything, I think that's probably a bit too small. So I need to move it in between somewhere. There we are. And once again, this is touching the diffusion material, but I've moved it a little bit closer in, so the hotspot should get a bit bigger. Yes, and that's more like the sort of size that I want. So the next thing to do is to control the graduation. So to do that, what I'm going to do is actually separate the diffusion material here from the flash head. So if I just bring that all the way in, so that it's very close to the table, like so. Yes, there we are. So now I've got quite a gap between the flash head and the diffusion material. So that should make this gradient less abrupt. There we are. This is what we had before, and this is what I've got now. So again, maybe I've overdone it, so I just need to move it back a little so it's a bit closer to the flash head. There we are. So let's try it about there. So that's about 150 millimeters away, 6 inches, something like that. Yes, that's a nice compromise, I think. So I've been able to control the size of the hotspot and the gradient just by moving the flash head and the diffusion material. So with all that now set, we're almost ready, but not quite, to start pouring some wine. Okay, so before we start getting messy, what I'm going to do is just have a close look at the picture, just to see if there's anything that we need to do. So I'll zoom all the way in. You can see that the autofocus really nailed the position. That looks pretty good. I think I'd just like to set a white balance. I'm just going to use the white balance set procedure on the software here. There we are, just to get a neutral grey in the background. And I can also see that I've got 1 or 2 highlights from the house lights in the image. So what I want to do to take a proper picture, if you like, is just to turn the house lights out and then grab an image. There we are, so with the house lights out, I'll just grab an image. Yes, and you should be able to see that I've now got rid of all of those highlights in the bottle and the highlights that are on the bottom of the glass there. Good. So that will now give me a clean slate picture. So this I can use if I get any spillages or I mess up the glass. I can composite this image into the one with the wine in it. So it's about time to start pouring some wine. So here I have some red wine, and I've put it in this jug so it's easy to pour relatively quickly into the bottle and then on into the glass. So once again, I'll turn out the house lights and we'll give it a go. And there, in this capture, you can see we've actually got the wine pouring out of the glass. We've got a few spots of wine which have spilled. It's gone down the sides of the glass, etc. But I can clean all that up because I have this other image to go for. So with that, it's probably time to reset and take another image. So there we are, I've reset the glass, so I'll turn out the house lights, we'll take a blank slate, and then I'll pour some wine and grab another image. And that's basically the routine from now on. The only random part that I have left is the way the wine ends up in the glass. Okay, so out go the house lights, and I'll grab this image. There we are. So that's our new clean slate. And now I'll just pour the wine. Yes, now that one I really like, but I'll give it one more try and see what comes up next. So for the wine pouring images, we have that one, and that one, and that one. So I think it's this pair, the last ones that I captured, that I'll take forward into Photoshop and do the post-production. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop, and I've loaded up the last two images that I captured. So this is the wine pour, and this one is the blank slate. So what I'm going to do is use these two as a composite. So to do that, I need to make them both into the same file. So I'll go to File, come down to Scripts, Load Files into Stack, and just ask it to add the open files. Now I'm going to click on the Attempt to Automatically Align, because most of the time for an image like this, it will actually get it right. Click on OK. There we are. So Photoshop has made me this new file, which consists of these two images on separate layers, and hopefully they're all aligned. So now I can actually just dispense with the camera originals. I've always got those to go back to, and it's this file which I'll be editing. Okay, so I'll just make sure that the top layer here is selected, and what I'm going to do to that is just add a layer mask to it, like so, and I'm just going to invert that layer mask, which will hide that image. There we are. So now it's actually brought through the one which is underneath it. So in here I can see that there are a few specks on the glass that I actually want to get rid of. So what I'm going to do is, initially I think I'll just zoom in a little so I can see what I'm doing a bit better. There we are. And you can see these are the specks that I'm not too enamored with, and I think there's one over here as well. So just to get rid of those, what I'm going to do is just paint in white on this mask, which will bring through the overlying image. So just make sure that white is selected as the foreground colour. Grab a paintbrush, and we'll just make that a more reasonable size. I want it relatively small, but not too small that I can't do anything with it. Okay. So then I can just use that just to get rid of those parts of the image that I don't really want. There we are. And because this is a composite, if I wanted to get rid of, say for instance, this part here, I could just paint that out. It doesn't matter that the glass is in the way, because the glass is still there on the composite. But actually I quite like that, so I'll take that last bit out. There we are. So you get the idea. So with that, I'll just zoom back out again, and I'll crop the image to its final dimensions. I'm using this for video, so I've got a specific ratio of 16:9. And what I think I'll do is just bring this down a bit just to concentrate it. And I want to move it up in the frame. And there we have it. An apparently random picture which has most of the randomness taken out of it. And I think that's worked rather well. Okay, well I hope you liked watching how I made that image, and if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Oh, and hit the like button. Thank you very much for watching.